Okay. So when I was trying to come up with something to present here, I really wasn't sure. I'm not the best at preparing advanced presentations like some of my friends. And if you guys were here yesterday, I was talking with my friend Nancy Shepard, who is a historian who is all about presenting controlled, structured stuff. Um, Anybody who has ever hung out with me at any of the events, including the last 2 years at the Slover Library Local Author Fair, knows that I have a tendency to just kind of ramble in any different direction depending on how the conversation goes. So I figured I'd kind of turn into my strength there and just try to open things up, and hopefully you guys. I have the chat open up on my thing, so at any point, if you have any questions or whatever, feel free to throw them out there. I can keep track of that. Um, I don't know what everybody exactly is going to want, so I'll just start with introducing myself and then give a little bit of a history of my experience with independent and self-publishing. And you'll find I kind of use those terms interchangeably, and I'll kind of go over that a little bit with the history. As for myself, I have been published. Uh, it'll be 10 years since my first book was published this upcoming May. So I've been around and doing stuff for quite a while. My very first book was self-published. I founded a publishing company back in 2010, predominantly for self-publishing. Haven't published anyone else yet. Don't really intend to, but that's kind of where I'm at right now with that. Prior to that, I was a high school English teacher up in Philadelphia, where I'm originally from. Um, and when we moved to Virginia back in 2010, I became a stay-at-home father for the first time. I had a 5-year-old and a newborn. We have since added another child since then. So my first job, and if you read my profile, I always lead with that, luckily following Eddie there, I am a father first, and then everything else comes after that, both philosophically as well as what my time requirements are go towards my children first, and then everything else. So lately, obviously, the author part and the writing part of my life hasn't gotten a whole lot of work because I've been stuck home with 3 children. So um, uh, since my first book was published in 2010, I have published one other full-length novel, a collection of short stories and novellas, and I've been published in 10 to 12 different anthologies of short fiction. I've discovered a couple of years ago that I really enjoyed writing short fiction. My Toonopolis world, that is the centerpiece for my primary property, is um, lends itself very well to short fiction. I have over 100 characters, over 20 to 30 different sections of the city that I've developed, so I can very easily kind of pick small minor characters and write little short stories for them that kind of flesh out the world even further. Um, so as far as the history of my experience with independent publishing, as well as kind of how it's changed in the last 10 years, that has made it easier to do and more of an acceptable path. Anybody who's been trying to get into this world for a while knows that even as short ago as 15 years ago, self-publishing was predominantly considered a vanity thing. You spent a whole bunch of your own money. You ordered 100 to 500 copies of your book, and then you kind of turned around and hoped that you'd be able to sell them to make back your money. Um, a lot of that really changed. There was 2 major changes from a technological standpoint in the last 10 to 15 years that opened that up. The first one was for printing companies started offering print-on-demand services. So if you've looked into it, if you've done any research on it, right now it's Amazon, Lulu, are the 2 primary ones. Used to be CreateSpace, but Amazon purchased CreateSpace, as they tend to do, and rolled it into their KDP print service. Lightning Source is another option, or through Ingram Direct. So what's nice about that, and what makes it kind of doable for those of us who aren't seeing this or aren't necessarily getting the revenue as this to be a full-time job to be able to pay all of our bills, print-on-demand services allow us to not have to have that upfront investment on actual product to be able to turn around and sell. The way that works is, for example, I currently use Amazon through KDP Print. Their quality's been great, and they're, unfortunately, as much as I try to stay away from Amazon if I can, they've been really good for us as far as the independent publishing community. So If somebody goes on Amazon right now, all of my books are available. Most likely, Amazon doesn't have a physical copy in any of their warehouses. They, list it as available. Somebody orders it, they click buy, it triggers to the printer to print a copy of that book and then mail it to the customer. So none of us are really out and sitting on product trying to get rid of it. Um, the only difference there is when I come to public events or where we can actually hang out and do stuff and sell books. I can order what I need for specific events. I can order 20 copies if I think that's all I need. I could order 100 copies, and I can kind of flex as needed depending on what type of event or what my stock is, and it allows me to maintain that from a small business standpoint without as much overhead. The other big thing that changed in the other big thing that changed with the technology changes is, as everybody knows, ebooks. And again, Amazon was at the forefront and leading the charge on that one. Um, because of the rise in ebooks, KDP, and things like that, again, it was another thing that allowed independent or self-published authors to get their product to consumers without having to spend hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars to be able to do that. Um, so that's kind of what made it change. And to me, I don't I don't see self-publishing as vanity anymore. I don't see it as a path that people shouldn't consider. Um, by all means, anybody who feels like they want to go through traditional publishing, the traditional channels, find an agent, find a publisher, all of that type of stuff, that's still an option as well. I don't see one as greater than the other. I see just two different paths to getting there. Um, the big thing that a publisher will offer you, whether or not it's a big publisher like one of the big five or a smaller publisher, is they will generally cover additional costs like editing, cover art, things like that. But that also usually you're giving them a percentage for that as well. You're also giving them final say over what the cover looks like. Depending on how the contract is wording, they can have final say over the title of the book, final editing, things like that all falls on them. So for me, I prefer having my stuff controlled entirely by myself. So I get final say over art and titles and editing and all that other stuff. But I don't look at it and say, well, if traditional publishing is a failure, it's not. There's still a market for that. There's still a pattern for that. It's just that independent publishing has added another angle for those of us who are trying to get into the industry to be able to do it without having to remortgage our house in order to take a shot at it. Much like anything else, I compare it a lot of times to a small business. You've got to invest in yourself if you want to get there. You're not just going to hit publish on a book on Amazon and suddenly going to be making thousands of dollars a month. That's just not how it works. It's just like any other small business. You've got to be willing to invest time and money into it if you really truly want to make it work. Um, so that's kind of where we're at as far as a history standpoint. Like I said, if anybody has any questions, feel free to just type them up in the chat thing. I can bend and change direction as needed. But again, as I know a couple people here or a couple people I've talked to who said they were going to be here, have interacted with me at events and know that I can fill 45 minutes just talking pretty easily. So if you guys don't ask questions, I will just plan on keep on talking. But I would much prefer to try to share some of my personal experience and share what I've done. And if not, I'll try to think of some questions that people often ask me at conventions. And I can kind of go into that a little bit as far as one of the ways of investing time and money is, once you get a product out there, you've done the best you can. You wrote the best book you could. You got cover art. You paid for editing. You got copies of your book. The next step that people often ask about is how you get into marketing stuff. And that's a really challenging thing to get into the marketing aspect of stuff. What I can tell you is for people like me who write in a subgenre of a subgenre, my primary stuff, my Tunopolis stuff is written predominantly for a middle grade and up audience, and it's predominantly fantasy, mix of sci-fi, kind of pull from both speculative fiction genres there to get stuff in there. Um, okay, thanks, James. I will answer that in a second. Um, the um, the um, the marketing for something like what I do online is pretty hard. There's not a plug and play model for marketing this type of book that Chinopolis is. Um, so I've found a whole lot more success just physically being out there. In actuality, in 2018 was when I decided to really start getting out and trying to market and sell my books in person. The Slover Library's Author Fair was my first ever public event as an author back in 2018. Since then, I've done Comic Cons up and down the East Coast, as well as author festivals and writing festivals. I've even done a couple of art festivals that I found were very successful getting out there. Comic Cons are my best; they're my bread and butter because my Tonopolis stuff is really targeted for kids who are into comics and graphic novels, but are having trouble getting into full-length novels, and I kind of fill that gap there. James is asking about Ingram. Yes, actually, when I first started publishing in 2010, I looked into the various things, and the big guns at the time were Lulu, Create Space, and Lightning Source, which is a subdivision of Ingram. Lightning Source was different at the time because you actually had to have a publishing company set up to be able to use them. You had to have a tax ID for a company. You couldn't do it as an individual, unlike Create Space and Lulu. So at the time, I actually went with Lightning Source. Again, like I said, Lightning Source is a subsidiary of Ingram. They have mostly switched away from Lightning Source and moved to their Ingram Direct subcategory, and they've moved most independent and self-publishing there. What I find is that I found more fees through Lightning Source and Ingram. Anytime I needed to upload a new book binding, for example, if I wanted to change interior content or notice the missing period on page 6, after the book was published and everything like that, and I wanted to go back and do it, I couldn't very easily change that stuff. They would charge me a fee, $30, $40. And when anybody who's ever tried to run a small business knows those little types of fees really start adding up, and you can't just throw $30 here and there. Okay, thank you, Eddie. The process with Amazon, and I got to say, I've resisted Amazon for a while. I was fine with them for ebooks. They have been the forefront of ebooks since they first really started, especially back like 2009, 2010, when the Kindle was first coming out, before iPad even, before Apple even released their first iPad. Amazon really set the stage for ebooks even existing and becoming what they were. So when I switched over to Amazon to use them for print back in beginning of 2019, I did that when I was putting together the collection for my short stories and novellas, and I tested their product with that. I found the process way smoother with Amazon. I've had no issues with them. Their proofs, the proof copies came in within 3 to 4 days. They were flawless, really good quality. And I've had no problems with them ordering with them since. Their cost is fair. My books are about 300 pages or so. They generally run around $4 or $5 at cost for me. I sell them at conventions for 15, which is what price they're listed for on Amazon. So, for every copy of one of my books I can sell at a convention, I make $10. If I sell it through Amazon, I only make $4.50 for the same exact $15 book through Amazon, because then they're taking their cut as both the printer and the retailer. So I've had very much success with Amazon. I've heard horror stories from people as well, but I've had no problems with Amazon. The KDP print quality is great. Their response has been awesome. The customer service has been great. So, as much as Amazon is, kind of evil from a corporate conglomerate standpoint, they've been very good to me. So I'm kind of sticking with them. So Eddie had asked whether or not, things like fairs are worth the investment as far as time, money. How do you know how much product to break and things like that? What I'll say is, especially for people that are first getting started, especially if you only have 1 or 2 titles or something that you're carrying, I didn't start coming to events and going public to events until I had I think I had 7 titles that I was selling when I first came to the Slover Library Fair in 2018. I carry anywhere from 10 to 12 titles with me. Part of that is because I have all those short story collections that are published through a bunch of different publishers. I can get them at cost from those publishers, and I offer those in addition to my Tonopolis books That way I have a variety of things that I can offer people, and it makes it a little more successful to sell things when I have more than just a single title. What I can say for people, what I usually tell people that are first getting started, if you only have one book, what's worth the investment as far as time goes is typically events like what Slover Library will put on, or any other public libraries in throughout Hampton Roads, predominantly because they are free for us. Uh, people like Josette and all around. Suffolk has great stuff. Chesapeake does really fun stuff, especially if you're in fantasy. They do the Fantasy event every year. Um, the libraries look at these as opportunities to offer something unique to the people coming to the library. And the librarians and especially the activities directors, are their biggest job is to get people into the library. It's a public service. It's publicly there. They've got public money to do it. They're not trying to get money out of us for the cost of a table to sit there. So really all you're investing at that point for those is the time of doing it. And I find they're worth it because even if you can't sell a whole lot of stuff, they're great networking opportunities. If your area is not busy, you might have a table neighbor that you can talk to that knows more than you or has different experiences. And a lot of the events that I've found out about or have been able to tell other people about have been through the networking opportunities at maybe a slower library event. And I've made friends. My table neighbor next to me at the first event at Silver Library in 2018 has been a friend ever since. I've actually been published by her through one of the short stories. One of my table neighbor last year was Nancy Shepard, who has been a fantastic friend since, and her daughter is one of my biggest fans. So I've had networking opportunities as well as sales opportunities. As far as how many books to take, it's really hard to gauge that. And that's something that's just going to take experience as well as knowing the demographic of where you're going. What I can say is, Eddie, for you specifically as a nonfiction author, you'll probably be able to move some of those books, especially in Norfolk at Slover events. I think you would do pretty well at a public event like that with your stuff. The demographics of the clientele and the people that come into the library would really meet the target of people that would be interested in what you're offering there. Other than that, you're really going to have to kind of ebb and flow based on what you expect the traffic to be. And a lot of the times, the people that organize these events can give you some numbers at the very least based on previous years. Slover tracks how many people came into the building. They can't track how many sales there were. All of that's individual, but they can keep track of how many people came into the building that day. They kind of have to. So you can at least get some gauges of numbers of, hey, how many people come? Do 1,000 people come to this event? 10,000? Is it 100? And kind of go based on that. As far as copyright challenges, Chris, I've never run into any. I looked into it a lot in researching when I first was published back in 2010, and it was I have at least one small child running around here. There may be more. I don't know. They multiply. But the copyright challenges, I've never run into any. Technically, as soon as you publish something, there is a copyright protection in the United States. You can register things through the Library of Congress and go through that. I think it's about $45 or $50 or something like that. I've only done that for my main stuff, my 2 full-length novels. I've gone through the full process to protect them. But I've never run into any types of issues with people claiming copyright, people trying to pass off my stuff. Now, part of that may just be I'm not big enough yet. The bigger your name is, the more likely stuff like that's going to come about. But I haven't seen that in any large scale myself, pirating of books or anything like that. I don't stress about that too much. And then, like I said, especially because I sell way more books in person than I do online anyway. So for me, it's about doing stuff online. So as far as ebooks, Kathleen is asking about. So she said she's planning on publishing a book based on an online group. So the platform better than paper book. Ebooks are really nice because you don't have to worry about things like length, for example. If it's a shorter book, if it's a little bit like a novella or even short stories, you can publish as independent individual ebooks. You don't have to worry about some of the costs as far as book binding and things like that. And I'll kind of combine this with Fran had asked a question about whether or not you should do an ebook before the soft cover. I do them both at the same time generally, but ebooks are generally a lot easier to get up and out and move faster. Really, and it also depends on what your target audience is and what you're writing. For example, if you're writing anything in the mystery, cozy mystery thriller, or romance stories, those are insanely successful in ebooks. If you're writing middle grade fantasy like I do, ebooks don't really move a whole lot. 10-year-olds to 15-year-olds don't really read a whole lot of ebooks. And I know that as both a former teacher as well as just somebody who's been out there trying to sell these books to people. Um, it took off. The biggest target demographic that really took off with ebooks are your readers of mysteries, thrillers, and romance, which are already your top title, your most successful genres to begin with. And generally because those readers are chain readers. Those are your 30 to 50-year-old, predominantly women, especially in the mystery and romance section, who will just read a book and load another book and load another book and finish that book and load another book. So they sell so much better because of that. So as far as the softcover goes, or paperback, that's more for me. It's more if you think you're going to want to be out there at events. Having a physical product to sell is drastically different than, say, going to an event and offering people, a business card. Here, go download this book. If you're trying to sell something new to somebody, if you can't close the sale right then and there, most likely you've lost that sale. It's a challenging thing. I'm a little fortunate in a couple of reasons. I'm a little bit more extroverted than most authors, especially fantasy and sci-fi authors who tend to be a little more introverted. But I also had 10 years of experience prior to being a teacher. I was a store manager for Best Buy and GameStop for years. So I actually have real Fortune 500 retail sales experience that I can utilize while I'm trying to sell stuff. So I would definitely say it's always worth putting out an ebook. The question is whether or not you want to stay exclusive with Amazon, which offers you some benefits, but then makes it so that you can't offer it through other platforms, like through Nook or Apple, iBooks and things like that. And that kind of comes into a personal thing of where do you think your target audience is? Do you think that they are even buying books from anywhere else, or do you think they're only buying from Amazon and it's worth taking advantage of, giving them some exclusivity for the ability to make the book free for a little bit if you want to try to get some marketing and things like that. So that's pretty much it as far as ebooks. It's definitely worth doing. It's a lot less of an investment, even for, and I'll kind of segue this into Monica's question about cover art. For an ebook, you only need the front cover. You don't have to pay for a full binding of art for a cover. All you need is the 6x9, single poster size, poster shaped image of a book, and you've got a cover for an ebook. So as far as companies to use for ebooks, for cover art, there's really a lot of them out there. I personally, as you can see on my books here, I've commissioned custom art from artists that I know. I write in a cartoon universe, so I have a more cartoonish style for some of my covers. Obviously, most people pick up my books at conventions, immediately look through them, assuming that they're comic books or graphic novels, and that's kind of done intentionally so that people are drawn to them, especially 10 to 15-year-olds that are there, especially at a Comic-Con like Tidewater Comic-Con or Hampton Comic-Con, are there specifically looking for comics and graphics. But parents and librarians love me because I trick them into reading actual books with 60,000 words instead of just comic books. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love comic books. I think they're great, but those of us who have taught reading, or librarians, teachers, and things like that, know that the more words you read, the more diverse your vocabulary is. Unfortunately, with comics and graphics, you're typically limiting the amount of words that you're seeing because all you're mostly getting is dialogue. So the diversity of words is lost due to the art covering all of the narration and things like that. So as far as cover art goes, I don't have a specific company that I use. I personally have some graphic design skills, so all of the lettering and text on these images I do myself with Photoshop. So I was able to, luckily that's a skill that I've been able to develop to work on. I can't draw, so I'm not an artist, but so I pay for art for that. But if you are, again, especially if you're in one of those subgenres that is a little easier to sell, if you're writing romance, mystery, thriller, there are companies out there that sell pre-formatted covers. And you can get a really good cover for, say, $50. And what they do is they have covers that they make and that they will customize with your title, your name, and things like that. They've used stock footage and stock photos and things like that to generate a cover. And you can usually find a cover that matches your thing. And the way those companies work is once you buy that cover art, you own it. They will not sell it to another person. So it's not like you'll see another book with the exact same picture on it, with just a different title, for example. Um, Other than that, it's about just feeling comfortable with who you're working with, especially if you need something like I do, where you need custom work, because these are custom designs, based on my characters that are in the stories, uh, done by artists. The artist that did the top one there for the original book was actually a storyboard artist for shows like Bob's Burgers and Archers, but we've been friends since we were teenagers, so I was able to get her to do the art. Um, she unfortunately, when I was publishing the second book back in 2019, she was actually working as the in-house artist for Valve, which, for those of you that don't know, is the company that owns Steam. If you're either a gamer or have children who are gamers, trust me, they know who that is, and they know how big it was to be an in-house artist for them for years. So she was too busy. I couldn't get her, so I had to find a different artist who was another old friend to work on the second cover as well as the third cover that I don't think you can see. Oh, there you go. Now you can see it. The same artist did the second and third ones there, so that I at least had a consistency in style, so that they look like they match when they're sitting next to each other on a shelf. Um, so I think I got every question that anybody's ever asked. I don't know if anybody want me to elaborate on anything there. If I was talking too fast and need to repeat things, feel free to let me know. Um, Other than that, I'll try to think of some other experiences that I had that I could maybe share for those that are already out there. So kind of going back to Eddie's question about whether or not fairs are worth the investment. As I said, the best thing to do when you're first starting is to go to the free events, library events. Libraries are always wanting to host events. Honestly, most of the time you could go to a library and say, hey, can I just show up? Can I schedule a reading? Can I schedule something like that? The vast majority of librarians and especially library programming directors are very excited to work with, especially local people, for that. It allows them to offer a very unique thing to the people, the patrons of the library. It's an activity. It's something they can schedule, something they can, tell people, hey, come, this person's doing a reading, and this, they wrote a mystery novel, they're going to do a reading or do a question and answer session. And especially these types of events are really nice because we all kind of amplify each other. One of the benefits of having, say, 20 different authors coming together is that you've got 20 different people that are trying to market people, hey, come to my thing. And then there's other people here as well. And we all kind of help, bolster each other. Whether or not it's worth the investment for a larger scale event, I can give you some kind of idea of what that costs. For example, Tidewater Comic Con is the big Comic Con in Virginia Beach every year. Obviously, it was canceled this year, unfortunately, because it was supposed to be in May. But the Tidewater, I think the table for that cost me about $160 for 2 days. So it's not a small investment, but it's also not completely breaking the bank. But I can tell you, last year, 2019's Tidewater Comic Con, for that $160, I sold over $500 worth of books. So me personally, it was well worth it. I walked out of that weekend actually with a true legit profit, even considering the cost of my books, the cost of the table, and everything like that. I've had events where I did Richmond's GalaxyCon in February. That was about a $150 table, but I also had to travel there and factor in some additional costs. I may have broke even at that event as opposed to what I did at Tidewater, but to me it was worth it because I knew I'd be able to make back a good level of the investment. As far as selling and donating libraries to schools and books, I have, and I've been fortunate enough to have some larger sales to a couple of schools where they wanted 10 or 15 copies, which was obviously really cool to be able to offer that. Some of them, one of them was at a school, one of the part-time job I had before the coronavirus thing. I was still working teaching, and I was teaching basically life skills and career preparation. One of the schools I was working in found out that I also was an author and did some other stuff, and asked about my books, and ended up buying 10 copies of my books when I was there for my other job that no longer exists because we don't have students in school to teach anymore. So, and I have donated copies to libraries, especially my local libraries. I'm pretty sure, I hope Slover has copies of my stuff. I'm not sure if I did back in 2018, but if not, they can let me know and I'll give them some stuff. Um, but yeah, okay, I thought so. Yeah, I try to, because one, I want my, especially as a middle grade writer, that's where I need my books. You know, I could pay for as much advertising for books on Facebook or Google that I want, but I'm not going to find 12-year-olds there. You know, and you know, I don't have time to try to figure out, you know, Snapchat, and I do some Instagram stuff, but you know, I'm not reaching my target audience with online advertising for the most part. So what I need is, I need to get middle school English teachers and librarians to find my stuff and recommend it to parents and things like that. And that's how I can get some of that exponential growth. Plus, it's just nice knowing that I have copies of my stuff in my local library. You know, I know Chesapeake's Central Library has some, because that's where I'm from, Chesapeake, and they're around the corner from me. So, you know, I've given them copies of stuff and done events there as well. So um, I try to get them out there. As I said, the cost for a copy of my book for me to buy from Amazon to get a print copy is about $4.50. That to me is not a bad thing to donate, or to, you know, offer to somebody as you know, a donation, or even to sell at a discount. You know, when I sold 10 copies to a school, I sold them to them for $10 a piece instead of $15 a piece. Now I'm still making, you know, more money than I would had they purchased them for $15 a piece on Amazon. So for me, it's worth it to give them a discount. I'm still making a decent amount of money on it, and you know, I've done that for the two different schools that I've worked with so far. You know, I've been able to work that, you know, give them pretty significant discounts that they probably wouldn't have gotten by buying 10 copies on Amazon. So yeah. So let's see. Trying to think if there's anything else I can touch on some of the other.
Feel free to tell us some about your book if you'd like.
I guess I can do that until somebody asks some other questions. So, as I mentioned, you know, Tunopolis is my primary setting. It's my primary everything. Trust me, if you Google Tunopolis, you will only find me. You will find my website, my Instagram, my Facebook, my Twitter. Everything under that is my name. It's a term I developed 20 years ago and invented. I've owned Tunopolis.com since 2004, I think, 2005. So it's to go back to copyright issues. You know, the term is not trademarked, which trademark is very different than copyright. We can go into a little bit of that if you want, but trademark law gets really weird. But I'm not worried about somebody trying to claim that they invented what I invented with that. But so what Tunopolis is, it's a cartoon universe that is the home to all of our thoughts and ideas. So for those of you that are aspiring writers and have worked on stuff, basically the way Tunopolis works is, as soon as you have thought of something, you've got an idea, it's in your head. The second it exists in your head, it exists in the cartoon universe. So due to that, there is a very wide variety of creations that are inside the cartoon world. You know, ranging in everything from fantasy characters, sci-fi characters, romance characters. Everything is there basically, because all of our thoughts have populated that world. So what they do is they organize the, you know, Tunopolis by sections. There's different sections for different subgenres, and each of those subgenres kind of works within its own realm. So, for example, there is Super City, which is where comic book style characters go. And inside of that realm, they operate with their own laws of physics, their own, you know, the stuff that you would see inside the pages of a comic book or in a comic book movie. You know, in adventure realm, which is the role-playing game section of the city, is where characters go that, you know, function like D&D characters would. They've got to level up. They've got to, you know, they can't use a different type of weapon until they've mastered one type of weapon. You know, some of them operate with turn-based fighting and things like that. So, and the way the stories work is each chapter of the novels is a different section of the city. So the reason I recommend it for people who like graphics and comics, not just because of the style of the art and the storytelling, but because they move very episodic. Each chapter is like the closing of an episode of a cartoon or the ending of a comic book. There's a completion of that setting and that location, and then they're moving on to another section. You know, the story progresses and it's one overarching story for the novel, but each section kind of has its own resolution that makes it easier for kids who are struggling with full-length books, who look at a book and say, oh my God, this is 300 pages. How am I ever going to read all of this? to just know that they can just read one chapter and it's like an episode of a cartoon or an anime. Um, so Chris had asked if there's, if you have the same book as an ebook and paper. Yes, it's actually not. Yeah, it's not a binary choice at all. The only thing that differentiates with that is if you get into ISBNs, which is the international identifier that, on the back of a book underneath the barcode, there's a unique ISBN for that code. The rules on ISBNs is that you have to have each ISBN count for a type of book. So if you have an ebook, a print book, paperback book versus a hardcover book versus an audio book, all of those need their own unique ISBN. That is only relevant if you plan on doing what I did, where you set up your own publishing company and you're publishing everything yourself. If you publish through Amazon, either, whether or not it's print or ebook, Amazon has their own ISBNs that they use, that you can just use one of theirs and they don't charge you for it. The only difference that shows up on that, and it's really not relevant for most people, those of us who are here, probably all readers, how frequently do you check to see who the publisher of a book is? We don't. It's not something we do as readers. It's not something that we care about. The difference is if you use Amazon's ISBN on Amazon's website when they're selling it, they will be listed as the publisher, that it's published through Amazon Publishing. As opposed to mine, if you look at my stuff, it'll show Portmanteau Press LLC as the publisher because I have my own ISBNs. That was another investment that I had to pay for, that to me was worth it because now maybe that's a little bit of a vanity thing. I know nobody cares, nobody looks at it, but I wanted to be the publisher. If I'm going to be self-publishing, I want my credit. I want it to show up under my company, my name. I don't want other people to be able to have that. But for practical purposes of just getting something out there, you can use Amazon's ISBN without any issue. I think Ingram now does the same thing. With Lightning Source, you had to bring your own, but with Ingram Direct, I believe they have the same thing. They buy their own blocks of ISBNs and will allow you to use theirs. But that's it. But yeah, you can publish it in many different formats and in many different ways as you want. That's the only limitation there is the identifiers through the ISBN network of identifiers. So.
All right, Jeremy, we are almost at your time. So
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Not really. I really appreciate everybody's questions. My biggest fear with this was that nobody was going to have any questions, and you were just whoever was here was going to have to listen to me ramble for 45 minutes. But at least it was more directed rambling by being able to have all the questions. So I really appreciate it. What I can also tell people is, as a local author and as a local person that tries to interact, if you have any additional questions that you want to ask privately or didn't want to put in the chat or just think of later, you can find all of my, like I said, if you search for Toonopolis, you will find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of that other stuff. Feel free to send me any questions. I love trying to help other local authors. I'm a big proponent of independent and self-publishing. So if I can be of assistance, even if it's just for knowledge and experience, feel free to reach out. If you have any interest in my books, you can reach me all the same way. Everything's available either through Amazon. I sell through my website. Most of the time I'm doing public events when we can. Theoretically, I've got my next event lined up as Hampton Comic Con in October, but we're obviously not even sure if that's going to happen. Probably be looking at next year before we really get back out into doing cons and events again. So, but I appreciate everybody's time and the questions were awesome. So I got nothing else and we're good.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeremy. And we are rolling on into the next one.